welcome to Just Talk Funerals with me, Jason Threadgold.
And me, Nichola Threadgold.
Just Talk Funerals is all about the funeral industry, the people that work alongside us, and an insight into what we do.
We will have some special guests along the way, sharing their experiences and how their professions overlap with what we do.
So get yourselves comfy, grab yourselves a cuppa, and let's get into today's episode of
Just Talk Funerals.
Hello and welcome back to our next episode of Just Talk Funerals. Joined again today with Nichola. Thanks for joining me again, Nichola, today.
You're welcome.
Today we're going to talk about quite a contentious subject in the fact of what people think they know something's called. And we're going to talk about what people know as the funeral wake. So we're going to delve into this. We're going to chat a little bit about what people think a wake is, what it actually is, and what replaces what people think a wake actually is, if that all makes sense to you there. So if you can unpick that.
Okay.
Let's start with your perception.
Yeah.
What is a funeral wake?
So my perception is that it stays back from many years ago. I think it's such a big tradition within funeral services. But it's a gathering of people prior to the prior to the funeral service or even afterwards,
Yeah. I mean, we'll pare it back right to the start. So nowadays people know a wake as in an event that takes place after a funeral service.
Yeah.
But really that's not traditionally a wake.
Yeah.
So that would be a funeral gathering, a funeral tea, something along those lines. But a wake is where somebody is physically brought back into the home, if they've left the home in the first place, but they'll be physically brought back into the home once they've passed away, in their coffin, whether that be open or closed, but traditionally it would be open. And you would have pretty much the same thing that you would have after a funeral, but prior to a funeral. So everybody would be welcomed in, you'd come into the house, you'd have drinks around the person, whether that be tea or alcohol, it doesn't really matter. And then you would spend that time with the family and friends all together, celebrating that person in advance of the actual funeral service taking place.
I mean, the way I've seen it, and whether this has been depicted a little bit from media, is that, it was a lot of the time it was around alcohol. It was more of a celebration of that person. There'd be a lot of laughter. There'd probably be a lot of singing as well. And, having researched this over the years as well, it's been around not leaving that person that's passed away on their own, isn't it? It was so that somebody was always with them prior to the funeral. Is that right?
Yeah, oh no, you're right. So you're kind of watching over that person. And it's not all about the staying with the family and gathering and eating and drinking. No. It's kind of watching guard over somebody as well in advance of the funeral taking place. Funeral homes, as they are now, weren't a thing. Years ago, majority of things were done within the environment of the family's own home. And, getting everybody together, have a celebration, if you want to call it that. But then throughout the night, people would be there. In and out. And there are still some religions now that still insist on that. And it could be music and singing all night through. So it's not just a couple of hour event, a funeral. It becomes multiple days.
Do you think it is as well around, as much as people are gathering, do you think it is that there is something or some sense around not leaving that person alone?
I think
their journey into death.
I guess in one sense, because at some point that person is going to be left alone, whether that be in a cemetery or a crematorium. And it's trying to keep with them till the really last minute, and remembering them in many different ways. So you can take an awful lot from the word wake, as to pose what people actually know a wake as now.
No, interesting. Okay. So where did the word wake come from?
I'm baffled, and I haven't really done my research on this either. I'm hoping that you're maybe going to help with this one.
Yeah, well, I've got it wrote down because historically, a wake often involves staying awake and watching over the deceased before burial, which is where the term comes from.
So that makes sense, really, doesn't it? Yeah, if you think about it.
Yeah. But yeah, that is literally where it comes from.
Blimey, I never knew that, so I've learned something today.
Okay. And why do we feel that people once felt it was important to watch over somebody who had died?
I think in times gone by, I mean, you didn't have security, you didn't have alarms, things like that. So I would guess some people were either buried or sent on the last journey with things that might have some monetary value to them.
Yeah.
So potentially, I would guess that they didn't want anything happening to the person or the things that are with that person either.
So we talk about maybe it could have been more about religion. What about superstition?
Oh, there's all sorts of superstitions in this industry, isn't there? When you talk to people that have been in the industry a long while, especially carers, in care homes and things, and for instance, we're going to open a window to let the spirit leave.
Yeah.
There's it really is strange how people hang on to things that have been probably hearsay or, like you say, superstitions over the years.
Yeah.
Whereas it's probably not fact, and there is an element of fiction in there as well.
Yeah. I've got another talking point here again, and I'll read it because I don't want to get it wrong. But it says, historically, the term wake comes from the idea of remaining awake and keeping vigil beside the body before burial. In parts of Britain and Ireland, this kind of vigil was sometimes called a lich wake, and lich meant corpse. And then early traditions were linked to guarding the body, showing respect, like you've said, the spiritual side. So I've never heard of, and I don't know whether I've even said that right, lich, or if it's lick wake, or...
I don't know, we'll have to go research that and come back to that one another time, I think, probably.
Yeah, interesting though.
So let's talk about what did a traditional wake look like. So we've talked a little bit about people gathering in a home, people eating, drinking, spending the night there, singing along. I guess probably in the Irish Catholic fraternity, this is still a thing that is a thing.
Yeah.
And I can just imagine there's people sat singing all night. There's somebody with a little instrument there in the corner. Occasionally somebody brings him a pint of Guinness so you can drink between sets. But yeah, a traditional wake. I think personally I've never witnessed a traditional wake. I've been to many wakes in advance, but it would be nice to get in a time machine and go back and see what a traditional wake was like, because I think it would be a lot more celebration than you probably find after a funeral.
Yeah, I can imagine there'd be a lot of storytelling as well, talking about that person, telling probably some real funny stories about maybe what they got up to in life, a lot of memories.
Yeah, I would think probably as well, you'd bring in the priest or the vicar might even come in the night before and join you as well. So they may have prayers over the person in advance of the funeral. I would think, like you say, storytelling, whether the priest then gives a little bit of a sermon as part of that storytelling. I think a lot of comfort has probably been brought to people by being given that opportunity.
So in terms of wakes then, would you say that in the past they were sad or social? Do you think people often assume that wakes were just sombre and quiet? Or do you think there is... do you think that was a side to them as well?
Yeah, I think my personal opinion on it is more of a social thing. Because, yes, much as there's sadness, and yes, you're going to probably endure that through the actual funeral service, you're going through your own grieving in advance of this, and to break that up a little by bringing all them people in and doing the storytelling and things. I think nowadays the eulogy in a funeral has become more about that, whereas that was never a thing before. You would go through a ritual of a funeral service. Now that storytelling's probably been encompassed in the actual funeral itself, whereas in the wake prior, then that would give you the opportunity to do that. And you can laugh and joke about all sorts of things, and what people have been up to, and it just breaks the ice a little bit, doesn't it?
And I guess for those that are remaining and the family and the close friends, in terms of mindset and feeling okay about this fact that this person has now passed away, must have helped in so many ways.
Yeah, I think by bringing community together, it just shows the support you've got from those around you.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we see it no end of times where people, not intentionally, but people get ignored by members of the community because they just don't know how to be with somebody that's lost somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, we go on about this all the time about just being yourself and being normal. Don't profess to be anything else. But I think as part of a wake, by bringing people in and maybe with the intervention of a little bit of alcohol, maybe some of them inhibitions are dropped a little. So it does open up to talking about that person in a much more open way. And just by sharing experiences or sharing things that have happened, that's bound to help people along the way in the grieving process.
Why do you think we don't have these sort of wakes so very much nowadays?
I think a lot of people build themselves up to the funeral service more than anything now. And the night before, it'll all be about their immediate family and getting them ready and making sure that they're presenting themselves at the funeral correctly the following day, making sure if you're using your own transport, your cars are all clean. There's loads of things that people are doing prior to a funeral nowadays.
But do you think we've maybe not shied away from the fact of having this wake the prior evening where the coffin is open? Do you think there is something around us as humans over the years we've decided that is something we don't want to face?
There is a sector of the community that will never ever want to see somebody that's passed away. And then equally, on the flip side, there's going to be people that want to be there with them all the time.
Yeah.
I think probably we try and protect those that are around us, those that are surviving somebody that's died.
Yeah.
And sometimes you kind of take that opportunity away from people to see or to witness. We try and protect kids all day long through this, but I can tell you now, you bring a child into a room where somebody that's passed away, they are pragmatic, they are to the point,
lighten the mood.
They're going to say it as it is because they don't have the filter. They've not been trained to have this fear of what they should and shouldn't say. So I would always encourage people to bring kids into that kind of environment and see how they react. Let them get upset, let them show their emotions, and let them see you getting emotional as well.
What do you think the true purpose of a wake was then? Is it really about the person who has died, or is it just as much about the people that were left behind?
I think it's a mixture of the both, really. Like I say, like we've covered there, it's bringing people together and celebrating that person, and then people that come along showing their love and affection towards them people that are still surviving. So it's not all about the person that's passed away. I think it's about everybody that's surrounding them as well.
Yeah. Do you think it's a nice sort of transition as well into like having the wake the evening before, so you've got probably your closest family and friends with you, and then that transitions nicely into the day of the funeral? Do you think it's...
Yeah, because I think the day of the funeral, that then opens up to anybody and everybody to come to that funeral. So it's not necessarily all just your close friends and family. And there's probably going to be lots more people come to the actual funeral service than maybe would have come to the actual wake the night before.
Yeah, no, interesting.
Yeah, and then what we now know is the wake, or what people choose to call the wake, probably your funeral tea. You've done a lot of your storytelling during the funeral service. Yeah. So then you kind of work in a room then when you go back to your funeral tea. And it's not like the night before where you'd probably all be sat in a room together and they'd share the stories as a whole. It's become more of a kind of formal thing where eating and drinking and chatting table to table more so now than it would have been in a house the prior evening.
I've got a cheeky question here. So how do you think you'd have felt though, being at a funeral wake the night before, drinking loads of alcohol and then having to attend a funeral service. Yeah, I can imagine there was a lot of people that were maybe a little bit hungover.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't know how to answer that personally.
That's why I'm just being cheeky, I think.
But I would think probably there'd be a lot of heavy heads.
Yeah.
Hopefully a lot of water drunk prior to them attending the services.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a certain sector of the community that are used to drinking, potentially, and it would just be another day to them. But yeah, personal experience, I can't say I would know about that. So you mentioned there, do you think wakes happen less often? Is there any sort of parts of the community that you feel are still keeping hold of it, and where is the wood in comparison to a different sector of the community? So, I mean, regionally, we'll look at this. So every town or city is made up with different demographic. Is there a certain sector of the demographic within a town that would maybe consider a wake more so than another, do you think?
I think when you talk about the different sort of religions, I think there are certain religions that we know still do have a funeral wake, don't we? I think there's probably wakes done in a very different way, again, within different cultures as well, that you maybe wouldn't necessarily class as a traditional wake, but they do something at like the evening prior or... Yeah.
Do you think they would call it something different to that, though?
Probably.
So say, for instance, you've got a lord of a manor has passed away in a stately home, and his immediate family, and whether he has servants or people like that, do you think they would celebrate somebody in a wake as somebody who potentially is working class, lower working class in a deprived town or city?
Gosh, that's interesting, isn't it? I guess so. Yeah.
I think they would do it way differently, and I think those that are not as wealthy or as well off would spend much more time celebrating in that context. I'm not saying by any means that people won't then celebrate in a different way after the funeral, but I'm just thinking in the way that people come together the prior evening before a funeral. I would think you're more likely to get people that aren't on the higher echelons of society. Yeah, that's my personal opinion. I might be wrong, and people might shoot me down for that. No. But that's probably how I look at it.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think there's a lot of families that are really, really close-knit, especially you look around some of the council estates around, especially around Scunthorpe as well. A lot of them families live really close together, and they've got multiple properties in maybe 2 or 3 streets. Yeah. I would see that these people would come together an awful lot more than maybe somebody that's got, like I say, a manor house somewhere, and then their next relative has another manor house in another town or city further away.
Yeah,
I just think community is massive, and I think the tie to the community, the more likely this is to happen. That's the point I'm kind of trying to make.
Yeah. I think as well, and I'm thinking as you're talking as well, I guess not so many people tend to pass away at home nowadays, do they? I mean, obviously we still do get people that do pass away at home, but I would think majority are either in a hospital setting, in a care home, in a hospice, and those people will either come directly to a funeral home. So I guess, that sort of takes away, in a sense, that, not the option, because we'd always give an option, but, probably a lot of people would then think, well, now that person is resting in peace in the funeral home, that is fine, isn't it? So then they probably wouldn't necessarily think about, well, should we have that person back home? Obviously, it's always an option, but it's not something that's taken up so much nowadays, is it?
Yeah, it's that moving person, somebody from place to place, I think is kind of what you're angling at.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I think once people realise that somebody's in the care of a funeral directors, then they don't want to keep moving them around unnecessarily. Yeah. Whereas if they passed away in their own home, they might have had the opportunity to come and say the farewells before they left that home, and they're comfortable with that. Yeah. Or there might be the odd occasion nowadays where they, like you say, they never leave that property, and we still do go in and carry out the Victorian style where that person never leaves the home. We will go in, we'll dress them, we'll measure them, we'll bring a coffin over for them. But then nowadays, because the length from death to funeral, we have other equipment that we'd bring in. So we're mindful that we maybe need to keep that person a little bit cooler than what the house is. So we'd bring in things like cover cools, which is like a cooling blanket, just to keep that person's core temperature down a little bit, which will just help preserve them until such time as we can get around to the funeral service.
Yeah, and I've known where we've done that, haven't we? And you know, we've had somebody that's gone home, and you know, we've maybe had quite a few days prior to that funeral. I know as a funeral director, you've gone and made many checks just to make sure that everything is still okay with that person lying at home. But yeah, it's, you know, something we can offer, isn't it? Which makes me think, you know, really the wake hasn't disappeared. It's maybe just changed in format a bit.
It's evolved, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's like for us here in Simpson's Corner, we can hold something on an evening, can't we, prior, where people can come, they can spend time with that person.
They can physically have a vigil if they wanted to, can't they?
Yeah, you know, that's something that we offer here, isn't it?
Again, it's all about choice, and then people will choose to do things by whatever reasoning they have.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will do that because generationally, that's what's happened in their family before. But again, it's all about our need to give people options about what they can do, because people don't necessarily know that they can do things like this. So we have to have these discussions to make people aware that it is an option. Don't feel like you have to do it a set way. It's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a big thing. And I genuinely think it's a big thing having somebody home the night before. And I think it's great. Why would you not? They're still your loved one.
Yeah.
And a funeral director, it's not putting a funeral director out.
No.
Or bringing somebody home, and it shouldn't matter whether it is or whether it isn't anyway.
Yeah.
It should all be about choice.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about, I know we've kind of covered some of this already, but what's the difference between a wake viewing and a funeral gathering? Okay, so how's your perception of a wake viewing and a funeral gathering?
Okay, so we've mentioned about a wake, and traditionally we would say that's a gathering around the deceased before a burial or a cremation. A viewing is where people have the opportunity to come in and see somebody prior to the funeral. And, you know, we find that a lot of people come on their own for that, don't they? Just to make their respects, to say their goodbyes, or they might come in groups. Some people need some moral support with that, don't they? Yeah, so I would say that's my sort of interpretation. Are you going to say something?
No, I totally agree with that. I totally agree. And I mean, we talk about these things, they are massively different because they're held at different times.
Yeah.
But if you're having a funeral gathering afterwards, a lot of people maybe think that you have to have them in specific places, but it's pretty much open to anything really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you can go to a pub or a club or a hotel if you want.
Yeah.
You can go to your home. There's all sorts of things you can do.
Yeah.
Is there anything that stands out to you as a bit quirky where people can go and have these kind of events, or what would happen at these kind of events?
I think what sticks out for me more is, I think we've had in the past where somebody's had a gathering, they've decided that maybe not the whole, maybe they've had the funeral, say, at the crematorium, and there's been, you know, a mass gathering, but then the family have decided that they're not going to invite everybody back to a wake, but then they've gone on to maybe somewhere, and I can't remember, but I know vividly remembering where somebody went and had a carvery with just...
Yes.
You know, and I think initially I was a bit like, oh, that's a bit different, but why not?
Why not? I mean, there's funerals where your after event would be a sit-down meal.
Yeah.
Much like it would be at a wedding. So what's the difference? Why not go for a carvery?
Yeah, and I think that was very new to me coming into the funeral industry, because I'd always seen it as more as a sandwiches and cup of tea type thing. And then obviously working within the funeral industry to understand, you know, the very other diverse ways that people want to mark that by doing something, but not as maybe conventional as tea and sandwiches.
Yeah, but if that's them, that's how they choose to do it.
Yeah.
There's plenty of places out there that can facilitate that.
Yeah.
And this actual one you're thinking of, I know which one you're thinking of actually.
Yeah.
The pub that they went to had a specific area that was set aside on like a raised area that they just booked out for the afternoon. They got their own space. It was no different.
Yeah.
There were like-minded people in the same area. Yeah. Yes, you've got to queue up and get your food at the carvery, but is it that much of a hardship?
I don't think so.
No, I think that was great.
Yeah. And, you know, it is, you know, who are we to judge what people want to do afterwards? I think, you know, the more quirkier, the better.
Yeah, I like a challenge as well. I like people to throw something at me that I'm not expecting.
Yeah, I seem to think, have we had one where somebody went and they all had fish and chips as well?
They have a very well-known fish and chip shop not so far away from here, yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. Yeah, each to their own, isn't it?
Yep.
Definitely. Yep. Okay, so are we saying then that wakes still do matter today, in whatever shape or form they take?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, whether that be prior or afterwards, call them what you will. Nobody's ever going to correct you and say that you're calling it the wrong thing.
No.
It's just become a thing that people assume a wake is what happens after the funeral service. And a funeral director will go along with that. If you get interested in wanting to know history to do with funerals, a funeral director will go through the history with you, but they're not going to correct you and say you can't call it that. So yeah, I think it's still a big thing, whether it's before or afterwards, because you're bringing people together. Yeah. You're talking about that person, you're celebrating, you're eating and drinking. Why would you not?
Yeah. And I think it, like you say, it brings people together, people that you maybe haven't seen for many years. You know, sometimes somebody's worked for a particular company. That company might have disbanded, or over the years it's evolved and nobody who worked there at the time is working there anymore. But that brings all those people back together, doesn't it?
You're giving people that opportunity to come. Yeah. Whereas if you don't offer something like that, then how are you going to have these stories? And you will learn something about the person that's passed away, even if you were married to them or the one of your parents or children. Yeah. You will learn something just by other people being in the room.
Yeah, and what comfort does that bring?
It's great.
Just amazing, isn't it? Definitely. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I think for today, we're going to wrap that up. We can talk about all sorts of different things to do with funeral wakes and teas and menus and all sorts all day long. But for today, that's it for now. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Just Talk Funerals.
We really care about what you think. We'd love your feedback on the subjects raised today. Or maybe you have a question you would like us to talk about in a future episode. You can contact us by emailing podcast@threadgoldfunerals.com.
If you'd like to know more about what we do and the services we offer, then please head to jasonthreadgoldfuneraldirector.com. Thank you for joining us today, and see you next time.